You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 33? Yeah, 33. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into our world. Hey friends, fans, and enemies, I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, or you've been binging it for the past 10 hours straight, I hope you've started to become aware of how vast this art form really is. Sorry, I had to burp. And how it crosses into so many different facets of our lives, from entertainment to fitness to social justice to therapy. Circus can reach and improve and inspire the lives of so many, and I hope this podcast does as well. In order for me to try to serve my lovely audience and every voice that needs to be heard, the podcast is going through some revisions so that it's not only an auditory delight every week, but also an online resource with show notes, transcripts, indexes, so you can more easily access and go in depth with your favorite episodes. It has always been really important to me to keep the podcast 100% free, so it's accessible to anyone. So I personally fund it, along with the generous donations from my amazing Patreons. I really want to hit my first funding goal of $500 per month by the end of 2018. So please, if you listen to the podcast, if you love it every week, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up to become a Patreon. If you give $1, we're at, I think, $438 I looked at today. So we need $62. So I know that there are 62 people out there who are listening who love this podcast every week and can spare $1 a month. That's $12 a year to continue this podcast success and grow it. So again, that's patreon.com/theartistathlete. My guest today is Dara Minkin. Dara is an aerial acrobat and dancer specializing in aerial silks and rope. With a Bachelor of Arts degree in contemporary dance from the University of New Mexico, she has extensive dance training in many disciplines, including Martha Graham technique, Gaga technique, ballet, and Middle Eastern dance. Having performed for 15 years and taught for 10, Dara has designed a teaching method for vertical aerial arts, soon to be published in book form, as a book called Proximal. She has taught for Womack and Bowman, Vertical Fix, Radical Movement Factory, Project in Motion, and many others. She now resides in San Antonio, Texas, and travels worldwide teaching and working on other projects. I should mention, Dara gave a shout out in this interview that I had to cut for audio quality reasons, but she gave a shout out to Julia Langenberg, who is the owner of Aerial Horizon down in San Antonio, Texas. Julia is also a dear friend of mine, and she's got an awesome thing going on in San Antonio. So if you're listening from the southwest of the United States, I highly recommend you make the drive to go learn from Dara and Julia. And you'll find out why, meet Dara, and learn a little bit about her book Proximal in this interview, which is coming at you right now. Dara Minkin, welcome to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here with you.
Yay! Can you tell the people at home who you are and what you do?
Yes, I am an aerial acrobat specializing on fabric, rope, and hammock.
How did you become an aerial acrobat who specializes on fabric, rope, and hammock?
Well, it was a mistake, a total accident. I thought that I was going to graduate from college and run away to New York City to be a dancer. And then I fell in love with aerial. So I auditioned for an aerial company called Air Dance New Mexico. And I also auditioned for a jazz Broadway company. I had to make a decision because I can only focus on one thing at a time. So I chose aerial and I never looked back.
Why did you choose aerial instead of the jazz and Broadway?
Basically, I had a dream the night that I auditioned for air dance where I was flying and doing backflips on a beach. And I woke up and I thought, that's the omen and the only sign that I need to point me in that direction. And I never danced again.
Wow. Or never danced, I guess, on the ground.
Yes. Well, yeah. And I say I never dance on the ground again because I don't get paid to do that. I only do that for fun.
And what inspired you to start teaching?
I needed the money, and I also wanted to have a student base. I was working as an office manager at a competitive dance studio, and I only was doing that long enough that I could create my own business and leave and be able to support myself as an artist. I actually didn't want to focus my career on teaching. It was just a way of getting me out of working for someone else. Although it also turns out that I love teaching aerial, and it's a really big part of my life. It's my testing ground.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's where I get to test my ideas on students. In joking, I call them my guinea pigs, but maybe it's not a joke.
No, I do the same thing with my students where I'll like test. Yeah, I'll have an idea and I'll be like, I don't know if this is going to work, so do it. Or I'll like watch how they mess up and try to like capitalize on that. Do you ever do that?
Totally. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm like, great mistake. Now it's mine.
Exactly. So you started teaching, or your teaching kind of company business, is that called aerial design as well?
Yes. Everything I am is aerial design.
You are.
Aerial design. I am aerial design. However, my stage name is Dara Minkin.
And then, so you have this business and you have this huge social media presence. Where did that come from? I'm thinking specifically on Instagram. You have something like 63,000 followers, which in like our little niche of aerial and aerial dance is quite large.
One of my superpowers is math. My father and my grandfather, they raised me with puzzles and geometry, and they taught me math. I really love data, which is a weird thing to say as a dancer. I even tried to major in math in college, but I failed. I didn't fail at math. I failed to continue math because ballet was my priority. So I chose ballet over advanced calculus. So when I was close to graduating, there was a period of time where I asked myself what really was the point of my studying math for so long. Mm-hmm. And I thought for a while that I had wanted to go into computer programming had I known sooner that I liked that kind of work. However, the artist in me is stronger than the mathematician in me. However, the artist also needs the mathematician as like a sidekick. When I graduated from college, I decided to use all of my math skills and data analysis skills to grow myself a following.
So you approached your social media following from like a super mathematical standpoint.
I basically tested different ways of posting material to gain momentum.
And so then did you look at like what material worked the best or got the most attention, or how, like what metrics would you use? Gotcha.
I started off with, some simple ideas like, well, what time do you post? That's a thing. Mm-hmm. That's an issue. Also, hashtags are an issue, and then content in your video. And then lesser issues, but still make a difference, are what you talk about in the in the caption, your geotag, and what kind of emoticons you use. But what I found out that were very big deals were the content and how you present it. So each one of my videos averages 12 takes, and I do it because it's made me better as an aerialist. I use that chance to do 12 repetitions to make myself perform better. Also, I got pretty good with manipulating the camera on my phone because I don't have like an iPhone. I use a Google phone, and I'm very attached to it because of its indoor lighting quality. I actually went online and I studied the quality of videoing between Google phone, Samsungs, and iPhones, and found out that you can get better indoor lighting quality on a Google phone. Now, another thing was that I know that in terms of beauty, that the golden ratio is kind of the innate aesthetic that we value as people, but we just don't know it. And so I tell my students that each of them have an innate sense for what beauty is, and that if they just trust themselves in what it is, that they can criticize themselves and lift themselves from whatever place they are in.
Can you talk a little bit more about the golden ratio, or what you mean by this like innate sense of beauty? Do you think that that's mathematical?
Yeah, I do. I think that it has to do with angles. Even if we're say that I did the perfect run of a video, if it didn't hit the golden ratios that I wanted it to, then the video was trash. Now, not that the experience of doing it was trash, because I learned something in doing it again, but that I had to do it again so that I was also making it a video. It's like a music video, and I'm training. My role as the videographer and I have to have the sound just right, or my hair just right, and the color of my outfit up against the background, and then be performing in the video all simultaneously.
Wow, you think about so much more than I do when I post. I'm just kind of like, here's my pull-up bar. Here's me doing something on it.
Well, and I'll tell you something personal about me, that I went to private schools. And so I felt growing up that I didn't really understand what was popular. And I always felt out of the scoop pop culture wise. So Instagram for me was my initiation into pop culture, and a way for me to see direct results between what I did and the results I got back.
Interesting. Yeah. And I feel like for an aerialist or an artist who is kind of like in studio space all the time, not getting a lot of feedback, Instagram is this interesting place where you can kind of instantly collect data or get feedback, whichever way you want to think about it. Do you find the drawbacks of that? Or do you think there are any?
Yeah, a little bit. Marketing is exhausting. It does have a soul-sucking nature to it. As long as I'm getting what I need elsewhere, then I don't feel like my soul is being sucked. Let's say that if I, do all of the popular things on Instagram, and then I feel like, oh, I'm a lesser artist because I, gave myself away so hard, then what I have to do in my normal life would be to give myself some way to acknowledge my individuality. Now, where that manifests is in my teaching. So when I teach my students, I don't edit out all the things that I want to say, like put it in your butt.
Wait, what?
Well, like there's like the goofy side of teaching. So, oh, put that in your butt, or, yep, you're going to wrap that right around your crotch corner, or whatever, or make silly.
Highly technical term, the crotch corner. Studied for years in anatomy classes to learn about that one.
Or just put that up against your adductor attachment, which doesn't do well.
You have created this tome called Proximal. What inspired you to write it?
When I began aerial, there were no information out there for how to learn efficiently. Yes, I could buy a book that was a vocabulary book, but I didn't feel that I was actually learning anything. It was much hard to boil down what the point of the lesson was when the noise was wrap this, wrap this, wrap this. And I also wanted to see what the overall arc of aerial was rather than seeing it from the detail perspective.
What do you mean by that? The overall arc of aerial?
It's the language that's spoken for all of the apparatuses. And I call that the universal apparatus concept.
As opposed to like what I would think of, or when I went to the New England Center for Circus Arts, we had a class that was called fabric theory, right? And It was all the ways that you could wrap something around your body.
Yeah, wrap theory is part of the universal apparatus concept. You can get very specific with each apparatus. However, you can also look at it from a holistic approach. What rules are true for all apparatuses? So I wanted to start there with the universality of it and then move in towards the details later. So my second book will be called Distal, and that will be a fabric book.
I was actually going to ask you that as a joke, if your second book was going to be called Distal. So I think that's really great that it actually is.
I'm glad you caught on.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, totally. I think it's great. So what are the kind of universal concepts that you address in Proximal?
Well, Proximal means close to the body and focuses on pelvic and spinal movement. It's an all levels manual. It's designed for technique on any apparatus, and there's two perspectives for the book. So there's the practica side and the theory side. Practica is for users who wish to learn how to improve how they move on their apparatus, and theories for readers who wish to categorize and understand the aerial language better. For me, I created it to remedy movement in the air and plant the seed for the concept of theory.
What do you mean remedy movement in the air?
I want to fix people's pathways. Rather than being so trick-oriented, to fine-tune how people approach movement so that it's not haphazardly done and then you have a pretty drop at the end.
So a piece of criticism as someone who's written, not the tome that you have written, something much shorter, but something I get a lot from people is that different body shapes or different bodies will move in different ways.
Absolutely.
How do you think that the anatomy aspect of aerial fits into these universal concepts?
I believe that people gravitate towards the apparatus that they're most closely related to already. I consider there to be 4 types. So people who are front body built or people who are back body built. So that's like anterior chain and posterior chain. If you're anterior chain, that's related to kyphotic posture, so like upper back hunch, but also, I mean, that's like the bad side of it, but the good side of that is that you have a really strong core. And I've nicknamed that category as forward folders. So like people forward folders easily can touch their toes, have strong cores. And then the other side are the posterior chains, the lordotic folk who are backbenders. Forward folders gravitate towards fabric, trapeze, straps, and backbenders gravitate towards lyra and trapeze as well. And that's not like a strict rule. Like you can change that over time as you learn more. So the other 2 types to me, and this is like, it's no judgment. It's just like accepting, like, is your inner animal like a butterfly or a tortoise or a zebra? Are like upper body heavy and lower body heavy? So, and I do talk about that a little bit, like how fabric placement can change depending on, your center of gravity will shift if you're upper body heavy or lower body heavy or kind of in the middle. I think that people should accept their inner animal or like their inner apparatus and not fight it. Don't try to be an animal you're not.
maybe that's really wise advice for me. I've resisted aerial hoop for pretty much my entire circus career, even though that's been what people have told me that I would be best on.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to generalize at all, because like if you're a hoop, and there's no argument there. And or I always feel really bad for lyrists who come to fabric classes and force themselves to do fabric, or for instance. But there's a lot of different versions of that, or like forcing yourself to get into rope when you're not ready.
But those aren't the only anatomical differences you could have, right? Someone
not at all
prefers forward folding versus backward folding. There's leg to torso ratio. There's a whole bunch of other kind of mechanics that are to be considered.
I discuss it when I think that it's necessary. For instance, like where your center of gravity is. I do actually, in one of the chapters, talk about butts and how if your butt is bigger, that you need to backbend more.
I saw that. I appreciate that. That was really nice.
It's like, and I also talk about men versus women having genitals that stick out or are going in. So like you do have to like move around them. So I definitely talk about that. And there's symbols throughout the book for moving around.
Yeah, the book contains a ton of different symbols, not only like the biological kind of differences, but you also have really great ones for like exercises that begin and end or that continue. And you allude to origami manuals, or like at one point you say much like a piano book of exercises. Mm-hmm. Did you use any of those kinds of manuals for inspiration when you were creating this?
Kind of. I've always loved origami books. I love that when the book cover, so like in an origami book, they show a fold or something like that. And then they never repeat those instructions again. They just show it later on. They just allude to it. They're like, oh, and then go back to page 33 where we did the banana slip or whatever. And you're like, huh? And then you're like, oh, I have to go to the other side of the book, rather than it being repeated and spoon-fed to you. And then with the piano book, I did learn piano as a child and I hated it. Because I was one of those kids that only wanted to learn songs. Or I should say I was one of those students that only wanted to learn songs and I didn't want to learn theory. So it is kind of karmic payback for me to be coming around and publishing a theory book. When I started Aerial, I became so obsessed that I needed to figure out what all the systems were, so that it would help me see the aerial language from the whole perspective looking in, rather than being on the inside looking out and just being frustrated by that.
Do you think your mathematics helped you with aerial work as well? We talked a little bit earlier about how it helped you with social media.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to know, because I see this a lot, aerialists and engineers seem to have this like beautiful meshing of minds.
Well, and I've thought a lot about that, like, why arts and sciences, that's a degree. Mm-hmm. Because they're seemingly unrelated, but seemingly related altogether. I think that for me, aerial is mathematical, and that I pursue it both from the artistic perspective and the mathematical, nuanced perspective.
Mm-hmm. What do you think's mathematical about it?
Well, the wrapping, the trajectories, how you use space, how you can kind of analyze zeros from ones, which is kind of like how it wraps around you. Is it a straight line or is it a circle? And then circles kind of break down into like figure eights and spirals. And one of my obsessions has been to take the seemingly infinite language of aerial arts and bring it to a finite state. Not that it will ever be completed, that you can see all of the parts and what those possibilities could lead to if you just put them in different variations.
Yeah, I always think about this with like music, right? How when I was little, I used to wonder if like you could create every single song in the world, because music is just a bunch of notes, right?
Yeah.
Rhythm and notes, and arranging them differently would create different songs. So there only can be so many arrangements, right? And I think of this, I wonder the same thing about wrapping in fabric. There's
Definitely.
an infinite number, but also how do we make it finite, or how do we create a system around it?
Yeah, and it's, well, for instance, you could have an instrument, and then depending on the culture, you have all of these different sounds that come out of the piano, or any instrument, string instruments especially, and drumming, and you can tell the difference between different cultures' rhythms just by hearing them, and even without understanding what they are. So, like a great example of that in aerial is rope Mallakhamb versus Western style.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's CIRCUS physical therapist Dr. Jen Crane of Cirque Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen. Cirque Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code PODCAST at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code PODCAST. Now, back to the show.
Can you tell for the listeners who may not know what rope Mallakhamb is?
Rope Mallakhamb is over 1,000 years old. It's from India, and it's a girls' sport. However, rope Mallakhamb is a girls' sport, and the ropes are a little bit thinner, and they believe that the rope is the monkey god's tail. So they never step on the monkey god's tail out of respect. Kind of like yoga, they've solidified these various sequences into the sport, and then they have competitions for it. There's other Mallakhamb sports as well that are for boys, but the rope version is the girl sport.
And you allude to this in the book, in the Universal Concepts book. How is this concept different than like a more Western style?
Well, everything that's done in Mallakhamb is the reverse direction of how it's done in the West. When the apparatus is behind the back, coming around the hips and through the legs, the Mallakhamb version is coming from the front of the pelvis, going around the legs and then down. So the spiral direction changes. It makes the whole thing look entirely different. The shapes are similar. Well, and they're also very fast. They also do a ton of ankle drops that are really scary. But I'm sure that they think they're awesome, which they are.
They are awesome. Maybe in the show notes for this, I'm going to include some videos from YouTube or something of.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Rope Mallakhamb. Yeah, because it is very cool.
I actually have a Mallakhamb pen pal. We haven't spoken a while. His name is Tisch, and for several months, we exchanged Mallakhamb videos for aerial silks lessons.
Oh, very cool.
And I have some really awkward videos of myself getting myself tangled into a mudra, like with my legs crossed and being like, this is supposed to feel good, but it really hurt.
Is it?
No, it doesn't feel good at all.
The other thing I loved about the book was the parallels you started to make about infant motor development skills versus creating aerial progressions or learning to move in the air. What are those parallels, and what kind of inspired you to make that comparison?
It's really funny that you're the person to ask me this, because I never, even though I added it into the book, I never created the parallel in the book for why I did it. I did that on purpose because the book is so vast, and I just wanted to give people the imagery for the concepts. And although the book references in the back will guide you to all of the information. In college, I took a lot of classes on release technique, Bartinia fundamentals, and Laban analysis. And infant motor skill development was a commonly discussed topic in school. Bartinia fundamentals begins on the floor and goes back to the moment of inception and being in the womb and discovering how to move again. And it is funny, like how being in school, I actually did a lot of rolling on the floor, being an unborn baby and learning how to move and crawl and wiggle and lift my head off the floor. And there's actually a really cool release technique that I learned from an Austrian woman, where you move through what she called, I believe the number was the 13 fluids of your body. And so you feel your lymph fluids, and then you feel your cervical fluids, and how your blood sits in your body. And so you move through those different layers. It's a lot of wiggling, but it is very educational in terms of not common practices for movement. Once I finished my physical representation of my thesis for the book, which is the pelvis, I begun my early stages of writing about evolving from a grounded biped into a flying quadruped. And so that's basically like a way of saying we go from being humans into like flying squirrels. And in order for that evolution to take place, one must be reborn as a quadruped. So I saw the overlap between my thesis, which is the pelvis, and then infant motor skill development. And I was like, oh, well, this is Bartinia fundamentals. And so I tweaked it so that you could do essentially all of the same things, but in the air, and learn them without the floor. You learn them on the apparatus. It was an enlightening moment for me because I was learning simultaneously while building the book.
So when does the book come out?
Kylie and I are scheduled to begin printing on December 17th.
And it's a physical book, right? Are you selling
Yes.
it online or just...
Yes.
And why did you choose that?
I wanted to create an audience that's interested in theory, and through my Instagram account. And I do not believe that having a book publisher would necessarily help me target my audience. And I would end up losing a lot of money because they would market it in a way that I wouldn't necessarily want it to be marketed. You know, I'm not very interested in bringing new people into aerial as much as I am interested in educating the already existing aerial community. And I mean, not that both won't happen, but I wanted to be in control of my content and not give away that control. And why would I publish with another company when I have 63,000 followers?
Oh yeah, totally.
Who love aerial.
No, and it makes so much sense to self-publish. I'm just interested as to why you chose to make it a physical book rather than send it or like create it entirely online.
I think it was selfish for me as an artist. I like to have the physical proof of it, and not for it to just be this passing moment.
I love that. Yeah.
One thing that I regretted about my college thesis was that it was a choreography and that I couldn't keep it. Even though I still have it on video, it wasn't quite the same as like having a painting or a sculpture. But now that I have a book, it's like, it's this real thing that exists and it's outside of me.
Such a bittersweet aspect of being a performing artist is that you never have a tangible product or anything that's outside of you that is something you can show for your work. You are the thing to show for your work.
This might be silly, but as a child, when I was 4 years old, I considered myself to be a baby inventor. I guess I kind of knew that I was going to become an inventor of some sort, and that I didn't necessarily feel that I was an artist yet. There's these things floating around in my subconscious that I want to get out and I want to create, and I have this drive to get them out there. I don't want to waste my time getting them out, because it actually hurts more to keep them in than just get them out of my head. It's silly.
I love that. I'm so glad that you've chosen Ariel as your medium to get some of this out of your head. I think the community is going to benefit a lot from this publication, for sure. No, for sure. But my last question is always, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
That's very difficult, because all of the mistakes that I've made were crucial in my learning. I wouldn't have it any other way. If I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't know better.
So you'd forfeit it. You'd just be like, nah, I'm not going back.
I think that my family kind of always told me to stay strong, and I would tell myself to be strong too, and to believe in myself and to believe in my instinct.
Well, Dara, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Where can people get the book?
My book is available through aerialdesign.co/Proximal, and it's linked in this podcast episode. The 25% off discount has already ended, but there's still time to save 15% if you pre-order before December 14th. After that, it will be full price. We do expect domestic pre-orders to arrive in time for Christmas, and international shipments will take a little longer, but we're working really hard to get the book out in time.
Well, it's good to talk to you, Dara.
It's very nice to talk to you too, Shannon.
It was super nice to talk to Dara. We have been messaging a little bit back and forth on Instagram for a while, and she was really sweet and supportive of my work when I was writing and launching my first few ebooks. And I thought it was the very least I could do to invite her on the podcast. But honestly, guys, even if she hated what I had wrote, I would absolutely support her new book, Proximal. I know this sounds sales pitchy, but I really do feel like the book is incredibly valuable for the aerial community. So just up front, before I even give any more of my reflections, I want to go ahead and say that you can pick it up at www.aerialdesign.co. That's aerialdesign.co. And you can also follow Dara if you're not one of the 63,000 people who follow her. You can follow her on Instagram at aerial.design. There was a lot of information in this episode. There were a lot of opinions given. Dara has some really interesting opinions. I think what impressed and continues to impress me most about Dara is that she's on this constant search in everything she does to create parameters or definitions. From the idea of the golden ratio of beauty, to mining social media for data, to finding a common universal language for aerialists, Dara is constantly manufacturing or creating or discovering systems to try to make the infinite finite. And I don't think that when you make parameters or definitions, you are being exclusive or in some way negating other aspects. When she talked about her search for universal language, she brought up Mallakhamb, which is a rope. It's actually a sport in India done by young girls. And what it highlighted for me was this idea that aerial and circus in general is cultural. We talked about this a bit, or I talked about this a bit in Searchma's episode when we talked about Mongolian contortion. There is a cultural aspect to circus, just as there is in any performing art, and how we move our bodies on the ground, our preferences, our tendencies, our influences, can inspire different styles of expression. Now, expression is very different than math or collecting data or these kind of incredibly objective markers that you can create. And this is, again, I think where the artist and the athlete kind of mesh, right? In Dara's world, it's the mathematician and the artist. But it's the person who's looking at the technique or looking at the technical or looking at the objective and trying to quantify it, while at the same time understanding that there is something infinite or subjective about everything and something that can never be put in a book. That's self-expression. And that's what we do as artists when we perform, when we explore, and when we create. And that's all I have for you guys this week. Next week on the podcast, Nathan Redwood Price will be joining us. It's a really great interview. Tune in for that. It was a lot of fun. I don't want to spoil anything. I won't say it. If you want to learn more aerial training tips and information, you can follow Aerial Design. You can also follow _artist_athlete on Instagram. On the World Wide Web, I am at theartistathlete.com, Facebook, The Artist Athlete. And if you want to help us meet our $500 goal by the end of 2018, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up to give a contribution today. Talk at you later, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast. Straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.